Welcome to the Security Weekly News wrap-up show for the week of 24 July 2022. It is episode 227. We've got Necrobots, class action suits, Paul, Github, Robin Banks, net neutrality, and all the show wrap-ups on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
Right now, everybody is talking about cryptocurrency, and the cyber criminals are hiding in the conversation. Cyber criminals use social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of the 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified 13 types and shows you how you can protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection by going and getting your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. FIREMON helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. FIREMON has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With FIREMON, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with FIREMON. Visit securityweekly.com/FIREMON to learn more.
All right, I'm Doug White, and this is the Security Weekly News wrap-up show, episode 227. On Application Security Weekly number 205 this week, Joe South, John, and Mike had Farah Mavatuna, the founder and strategic advisor at Invictus Security, on the show. Farah was on talking about web app security, and so, I don't even know how often I hear people say, this web app sucks. And so they were talking about web app security and how you really need a kind of continuous security program about web apps, and a lot of people don't think that way. Continuous security is challenging because it takes a lot of resources, and they were talking about that. They also talked about best practices and this continuous approach that he was advocating on that show. In the second segment, the AppSec News. On Business Security Weekly number 270, Ben, Jason, and Matt had Doug Landell, the CEO at Lantego, on the show. They talked about how a lot of current risk assessments and risk assessment approaches are not very effective. And Doug laid out his 5 essential elements of an effective security risk assessment. So definitely, if you're doing risk assessments or you're looking at risk assessments, that's a great segment to check out. I know when I saw the title of it, I was like, okay, I need to go watch this because I've been doing a lot of talking about that. In the second segment, leadership and communications news. On Enterprise Security Weekly 282, Adrian Cady and Tyler Shields had on Dixon Stiers, a solution architect at CrowdStrike, and they also had Jamie Moles, the senior technical marketing manager at ExtraHop. So they were taking 2 people, putting them together. The segment was about how, well, guess what? Vendors should work together to try and develop better integrated security solutions for their customers. And so I thought that was kind of clever. And they shared a joint philosophy about an ecosystem approach and how, this is, of course, something everybody has talked about forever and nobody really does, which is, how do you pull all this stuff into one big gestalt? Yeah. They also showed off integration capabilities between ExtraHop, Reveal X360, and CrowdStrike Falcon in a live demo. So that's pretty cool. In the second segment, Paul Kelly, Global Director of Technical Solution Engineering at Tanium, and Tim Morris, Financial Service Strategist at Tanium, were on the show. They came on to talk about tabletop exercises, live fires, and simulations, and how that may need to be a part of your training and analytical tools that are used in incident response training. The segment was primarily about incident response and how you should develop, how you develop effective teams, and doing live fires, and we've done this for years on the law enforcement side, on the public safety side, looking at to me, if you don't actually practice it, you probably won't be able to do it when the time comes. So talking about it's one thing, actually doing it is another. And in the third segment, the Enterprise Security News. On Security Weekly News number 226, David Monnier, the chief evangelist at Team Cymru, was on the show as a special guest in place of Jason, who is off on some sort of special assignment. And it's really a special assignment. It's not something bad. Although I'll probably pretend it is when he comes back. But he was on talking about asset management and ASM systems, and we talked about those. We talked about how those systems get used and kind of some things that you maybe want to be doing with them, and in our little commentary segment. On Paul's Security Weekly number 749, Larry was up first and decided to show you some of his Wi-Fi foo. And yes, I did practice saying that. But his Wi-Fi foo, and I'm going to say it a couple times since I practiced it. And they had a live demo on abusing Apple AirTags. So, how can you not want to watch that? The segment looked at AirTag beaconing, and they described tools that you might want to use for detecting those beacons and how you could create some new tools. A lot of fun. Larry is literally wrote the book on Wi-Fi hacking. I mean, literally. So, definitely worth checking out. In the second segment, the cybersecurity news. So my threat of the week this week is class action suits, which aren't really a threat, but this came out of an article that I saw this week, and I talked about it on Tuesday. And so if you don't know, class action lawsuits in the United States were and still are an effort to empower consumers by allowing groups that have been harmed, which is called the class, to file a joint lawsuit to try and put a little more weight behind it, in terms of you and I have been wronged, and we may want to take on a large corporation that has a building full of attorneys and probably some jackbooted thugs, just in case the attorneys can't scare you away. They send, some security people down to bust some heads with ball bats or something. And that's not a very successful scenario typically in the legal system. So me trying to hire an attorney to go after, a large organization is not going to happen. So, we're going to lose every time. And, so the idea of this was that if we could get all the damaged parties together in one place and file one massive lawsuit, well, maybe the little people have a chance, right? So now instead of having the two of us, we get 200,000 of us and we all file a suit together. And you see these things all the time. It's probably still not going to work, but, at least it makes you feel better about it. So, of course, this law was written by lawyers, and the cases are fought by lawyers. And as you might suspect, most of the money goes to lawyers. And, yeah. So in this article that I was reading, that kind of bothered me this week because it just sort of brought home something I've seen over and over and over again. T-Mobile has offered to settle a class action lawsuit against them for one of the largest data breaches in history. So T-Mobile had this massive data breach in 2021, and they've offered to settle after a class action lawsuit was brought. So you do get a response. So the class action lawsuit does get their attention. So you're not just now a tiny little gnat biting another little gnat on the butt of a giant corporation. You're actually a bigger gnat. But in this particular case, there were around 76 million with an M, current, former, and prospective customers of T-Mobile who were affected by this data breach. So that's a big number. That's a lot of gnats. So T-Mobile has therefore offered to settle the case for $500 million cold, hard U.S. dollars, $500 million U.S. dollars. Now, all those numbers sound interesting, and $500 million sounds like something. It's about half what the Powerball, is that the one that they're talking about being worth $1.2 billion on the next drawing or something? But it sounds like a lot, but it's actually not. T-Mobile's revenues in the last 12 months were in the 80 billion with a B range. So 500 million is about 6% of their last 12 months revenue. So it's like a really bad speeding ticket that I got last year, which probably won't keep me from speeding, and I just paid it. And that's what they're trying to do here. And the reason I feel like that this doesn't accomplish much is because the wronged parties, so under this, and this has not been agreed to yet, the wronged parties in this case are going to get $350 million in a settlement. Now, in a headline, this sounds great, right? Damaged parties get $350 million. Okay, but that is all the wronged parties who filled out the forms, and that's usually something you have to do. And you had to spend some time reading it. There's a whole bunch of stuff you have to fill out. You have to provide this and that. So let's divide 350 million by 72 million. That's the number of potential class claimants you get, and you get $4.86 per person. That's $4. No M's or B's. $4. You don't even get that. The law firm is filing the suit, and they will likely get a chunk of the settlement as compensation. Now, a lot of these kind of suits end up with the law firms getting 33% of the settlement. So in the end, it's estimated that the wronged parties in this matter will get about 4 shiny new silver dollars to spend any way they see fit in compensation for the damages done to them. So you can afford to pay for about half, well, that's a little more than half of the subway ride down to the Social Security office where you're going to have to sit for 12 hours waiting on them to call your number to tell you that your form has a wrinkle in it and they can't accept it. So you're going to have to go get back in line. And then, oh yeah, you also need to get your your Social Security number changed, and you need to go to the DMV and get your driver's license number changed, and maybe spend the afternoon trying to get the bank to change all your account numbers. I love it when I get these things. It's so frustrating. I think I have a lifetime supply of identity theft monitoring that's been issued to me as compensation for 1 or 2 years free of charge because some company didn't do the right thing, didn't have basic cyber hygiene, lost all my data, took it all, let some third party have it. And basically this kind of case doesn't do very much to slow down any breaches because the lawyers get all the money. The company pays out a settlement that sounds like it's really going to hurt them, but in reality, it's not. And now T-Mobile, in addition to this, in this settlement, they said they will spend up to $150 million, which doesn't sound like very much now, does it? But up to $150 million on new security measures through 2023. So they're going to spread that out over several years. So I guess they're doing something. Maybe they hired a couple of people or something like that. But I really think that until insurers and laws start putting a hurt on companies that lose your data and require them to actually do something meaningful for you if they lose your data, like provide you with hourly compensation for the number of hours that you have to spend trying to actually do something about this stuff and having to make all these new backups and change all your passwords and all the other stuff that they constantly recommend that you do every single time your data is stolen, which is 2 or 3 times a year, they're just going to keep doing it. They're just like, they figured it out. Remember the Ford Pinto where they actually did a calculation on the value of a human life and people were like so outraged that lawyers sat down and said, well, if somebody's killed, this is what we'll have to pay out in a settlement. And that will be cheaper if we estimate that this many people will die each year and then we'll have to pay those settlements out. This is how much it'll cost us each year. And recalling the car and fixing it, well, that's going to be a bigger number. So let's just let it happen. I mean, they're just peasants anyway. They're selling our data illegally. They compromise your information, all this stuff. It's just going to keep happening. The U.S. desperately needs something more like the GDPR, and the EU probably needs something better than the GDPR even, to start pressuring companies to actually do what they say, to actually protect your data and really do something. They also, the U.S. also needs that EU law about if you have a delayed or canceled flight. That's an awesome law. I had a flight canceled out from under me a couple of years ago. I actually got the penalty for the airline was so severe for that I got more than the value of my original ticket back. Literally, I paid like $500 for the ticket. I got $700 under that fine because they canceled the flight within so many hours of the flight. And it was exactly the kind of annoying thing that airlines do all the time. It's really, we need that in the U.S. But here's the bad news. This is a tough sell, because the companies don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to spend that money, and they don't want the government telling them that they have to behave in terms of cybersecurity. I mean, they don't. And guess what those companies have? Buildings full of lawyers, big barrels of money that they can pay lobbyists, and as long as that amount of money they have to pay lobbyists to give to Congress and dark money and all this other stuff is less than the amount of money they might have to pay out in these class action suits, they will do so. So, I mean, they did pass SOX, and they passed HIPAA, and they passed Gramm-Leach-Bliley, and the companies just literally about lost their minds. I mean, they did. They were absolutely going crazy. So as it is, if you lost your time, your data, your ID, etc., and the company's telling you all these great things you need to do, and they're providing you with a 1-year subscription gratis to some ID theft company, because it was their fault. They didn't have good hygiene. They had hard-coded passwords. They had an employee who got angry and just dumped all your data onto the dark web. At least you can get about half of a subway round trip for your trouble. Honestly, I mean, the form you have to fill out for these class action suits is probably not worth the time it took for the amount of money you get. I had one last year. The form I needed to fill out and all the material I needed to provide to provide testimonials, documentation of the event, that I did it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The total payout I was going to get was $1.21 per claim. So in the end, I would have got $2.40. I'm not against class action lawsuits, mind you. I think they do help victims. I'm glad they're there, but I wish people could actually be held accountable. It's just frustrating. Yeah, if you couldn't tell. And now the news. First up, I don't know if you know this, but Paul, the amazing Paul, did his first post for the public this week. It is a very fine article, and I'm going to use that word fine in two different ways. One is it's a really good article, and two, it has a lot of detail about UEFI or UFI. I always say UEFI, sorry, but it's about UFI and firmware and some of the things that some of the things in that article you're not going to know, or maybe some of you do, but there were things in the article I didn't know. I found it very educational, informative. The article is worth your time to read. It's about firmware level problems in Linux systems, and Paul does just talk about it. You know how Paul does it, all the examples and commands you can use. Very, very cool. Talks about vulnerabilities, how to fix them, and so forth using command line in Linux. It's definitely worth checking out, and I put a link to it in the show notes so you can read it too. It's free, so go for it. There are multiple NPM packages that are being used to push malware to Discord users to steal your credit card info and other info. Kaspersky reported that Volt Stealer, which is a Python-based piece of malware, and it's typically used to grab tokens, along with another tool called Lo-Fi Stealer or Lo-Fi Stealer. I don't know. I'm guessing Lo-Fi. Lo-Fi Stealer, which is a JavaScript tool, are being used in conjunction with each other. The code is highly obfuscated, and it was named Lo-Fi Life by Kaspersky. Basically what it does is if you install this infected NPM, Lo-Fi Stealer starts monitoring all your actions, while Volt Stealer is collecting your Discord tokens and system information, which includes your IP address. Lo-Fi Stealer then tries to change your credentials on Discord. It also tries to set your multi-factor settings to single factor, of course, and it tries to acquire all your payment information from Discord. The stolen data then gets exfiltrated to Replit hosted instances that are hard-coded in the malware. And they do have lists of all these different instances and domains and things if you are interested in this. Kaspersky said they're continuing to monitor and track the NPMs to try and get all of them removed, but be warned, what can be done once can be done again. Currently, they had listed, and they didn't actually have the names of the repositories there. If you go to there's a link in the article you can go through. They do have a bunch of listings there, but there were 4 separate NPM repositories that had been infected with this already, so beware. And speaking of NPM, GitHub has announced that they will add 3 main improvements to NPM. Not as a result of this article, but as a result of previous problems that they've had. They said that they streamlined the login and publishing experience, the ability to link Twitter and GitHub accounts, which doesn't sound like that's going to improve anything. And they got a new package signature verification system, which is, I guess, the part that would really matter in this case. They also did announce that they are actually enabling 2-factor authentication systems for everyone. They had a beta of that out in May, and they were letting people try it, but they said it would now be available to all users, although there's a hedge at the end of this. A lot of this is in response to recent incidents that occurred with GitHub regarding people pushing malware, people stealing things, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of apps and websites ended up getting affected by this. GitHub said they are planning to enforce 2-factor requirements on any accounts. So here's the first hedge. On any accounts that manage packages with more than 1 million weekly downloads or 500 dependents. So that lets me out. But so they're not going to enforce it otherwise. And it all sounded very scary to me anyway, since they weren't already doing this. And, but I guess I'm naive. They did then immediately hedge and say that this will only be enforced later, after the account recovery process is further improved with the additional identity verification form, so that they don't really have a timeline at this point for when that might actually be in place. Even scarier. Yeah. Well, last week we talked about Microsoft reblocking VBA and XL4 macros again after they had blocked them and then reinstated them. And of course that was because everybody went off the deep end when they blocked them, because all these people were using them and didn't realize they had blocked them because they didn't really announce it, and so then they reinstated them. And and of course, all this is on. You can allow them. It's just they wanted to block them by the default. So you can go all Wild West and just turn them on if you dare. But Proofpoint put out a report that basically said that if you look at malicious campaign stats between October 2021 and June 2022, there's a clear shift away from macros, probably as a result of Microsoft starting to play with this. There was a 66% decline in the use of macros over that period of time. The attacks were already shifting to the use of ISOs, zips, and RARs, and other similar files that that have contained media in them, like PDFs. And there was a growth in the ISO, zip, and RAR industry of 175% over that time. Here's the big one, though. LNK, or link files, took off in February 2022 and increased about 1,600% since then, after Microsoft made this announcement. I mean, basically, this is a good vector, right? I mean, the use of humans to cause the fail is tried and true. The means doesn't really matter. Macros worked forever because they were there. And, most of the people who fall for these macro scams had no idea what a macro was or whether it was turned on or turned off by default. They had no clue. And it's just the same with all these other vectors. I mean, my dad didn't know a VBA macro from a link file, from an ISO, from an EXE. So the medium didn't really matter. And the people who click these things are going to click them, unfortunately. Honestly, it's really tough. I mean, it's tough for enterprise, it's tough for individuals, and so on. When my dad died, I looked at his machines, and I had always helped him maintain his machines, but I never looked at his stuff. But I was looking at his email. And he had all these friends of a similar age, so they were like between 80 and 90 years old. And these people sent so many emails every single day. I mean, it was unbelievable how many emails he got from people that were forwarded. They were political, they were cartoons, they were jokes, all this stuff that you've probably seen on people's machines. And, I had told my dad, never click on anything unless he let me check it first. So anything had an attachment, my dad was very good, and he was very religious about that. So if he got a file he wanted to click on, he sent it, he called me and said, "Can you look at this?" And I would check it and go, "Don't open that, Dad." But a lot of the stuff that was on his machine, it was coming in constantly, was infected with macro malware. And I'm sure they'll just shift to the new vector. So it's definitely something for you to get out there to your people and make sure that they're aware of, that the vector will always keep changing. Don't get a false sense of security. A new phishing as a service provider is called Robin Banks. Get it? Robin Banks. Aw, Dennis Moore, riding through the land. Yeah, well, Robin Banks I love the name. I know they're bad guys, but they got a sense of humor. Robin Banks is spelled R-O-B-I-N. Yeah, Robin Banks provides users a pre-built phishing platform kit that targets well-known banks and online services. Citibank, Bank of America, Capital One, Wells Fargo, PNC, U.S. Bank, Lloyds Bank, the Commonwealth Bank in Oz, and Santander are all part of the default package. There are also Microsoft, Google, Netflix, and T-Mobile templates pre-built into this tool. IronNet discovered this platform and was reporting on it, and apparently it is already being heavily deployed in large-scale campaigns that started back in June. The attacks are typically delivered via wait for it, SMS, and email. There are two price tiers on the site. So we've gotten to this point. We keep talking about how black hat companies are starting to become these like legitimate black hat corporation. It's like they took organized crime to a whole new level. Tony Soprano had to at least fake it with a garbage company. But these guys are just like, no, we're a business. They have two price tiers. That's the lingo on the site. And a single page is provided to you for $50 per month. So you can pick the page you want to put up, and they let you put it up for $50 a month. And guess what comes with the $50 a month? 24/7 support. Talk about an SLA. I mean, I don't have any SLAs that are that cheap. That's a good deal. And I mean, they also have, if you really want to get serious, an unlimited plan that gives you the full Monty for $200 a month, and that also has 24/7 support. I guess that's the gold tier or the platinum tier or something. I mean, I wonder if their help desk is better than the airlines when you call them. You know, the last time I called an airline, it was like, we value your business, but waiting times are longer than usual. Your expected wait is 23.7 hours. I was like, what? I mean, I literally got told I was going to have to wait 23 hours. You know, it was like, please go to our website where you can't do what you need to do because you've already tried that. But go there anyway, where you can find out once again while you're waiting 23 hours that you can't do what you need to do to fix your flight problem. But the article has pictures of the personal dashboard you get, which look pretty nice to set up all your campaigns. So you may want to re-up your notices as long as you're notifying people about those macro stuff. You might want to notify them about this. A lot of these are just using the old tried and true, vectors of there is suspicious activity on your bank account. You might want to click here so that we can see if this charge for $7,000 is valid. And people click it like crazy. And they also use email, of course. So, they get you to click the link. It's the same. Now, one thing I always admired about China was their laws. Not that they're draconian and awful, but they're old laws. So under Confucian law, which is old, the Confucian idea of law was that everyone should be able to understand it. Now, obviously, they weren't including just like most laws and constitutions. They weren't including illiterate peasants in this, but it was all the important people. But they wanted everybody to be able to understand it. And one time I was in Nanjing and I picked up a copy of the Chinese tax laws for my tax accountant wife. Really, I was like, I went in the government shop. I was like, may I have a copy of it was in Chinese, but may I have a copy of the Chinese tax laws? And they have these little stores in China where they have all the laws, and you can go in them and ask for the laws on whatever, and they'll give it to you. It's free and a great souvenir too. But I took it for my wife, who's a tax accountant, and it was basically this little like pamphlet book that was simpler than the IKEA instructions for the best of wall unit. I mean, the U.S. tax code, and I looked this up. Depending on who you ask, is either 2,600 pages or 70,000 pages, and the argument on Slate was that it was closer to 70,000 than 2,600. But, if you've ever looked at tax law, you need 2 attorneys and a couple of accountants, and then maybe you can even begin to start to understand it. But anyway, the new U.S. net neutrality bill that's coming out, it has not been passed yet, but it was written, is only 2 pages long. It's going to be like open source. They're like, a bill that's only 2 pages long can't be any good, right? Just like those companies that tell you, free, that can't be good. But you remember net neutrality, right? I mean, a couple of years ago, we never stopped reporting on this because it was just all the time about, them trying to make net neutrality a situation where they could charge certain people more and certain people less. And yeah, exactly. But anyway, on Thursday, the Net Neutrality and Broadband Justice Act was introduced, which basically says in 2 pages, apparently, yes, so you can't even, it's still long, but that the FCC would have the authority to regulate ISPs since broadband is a utility that everyone needs, not just some luxury item, kind of like cigars or gin. And there's an old act from 1934, that old Telco Act, that says common carriers that provide service by wire or radio should be regulated like utilities, and that everyone should be entitled to receive them. So they do this to electrical companies and so forth. So as you might guess, ISPs do not like this. And so this is sort of the equivalent of throwing a rock at a hornet's nest. But ISPs don't like this. So, of course, the lobbyists are coming out of their crypts and getting out their bags of money. And it's not clear if the bill will pass. But you should keep an eye out for it, and we all will too. And finally, as usual, I could not resist a story like this. This story was about Necrobots. The name got me right there. I was like, okay, I don't know what that means, but I'm going to find out. I mean, humans use biotic materials, and this is what the term I learned from this article, biotic materials. You have a leather belt. That's a biotic material, right? You have a necklace made of bones. I mean, if you don't, you should. Biotic materials. Reuse, recycle, reanimate. But anyway, this story's even better than all that. Apparently, at Rice University, they used a dead spider as an actuator for a robot arm. And they named the use, wait for it, necrobotics. Yeah. I mean, if you want Weekend at Bernie's, we'll give you Weekend at Bernie's with spider-based necrobots. Yeah, baby. I mean, anyway, in all seriousness, it was a serious article. It was really cool stuff, and you probably should read it. I mean, it sounds silly, but it was actually really cool. They found that spider leg muscles are unique in that they don't have antagonistic pairs, which is like how your muscles work, right? Because you have one in the front, one in the back, and that's what makes you, pull and push. The spider had these like flexors, so they have a flexor muscle, and that their blood actually is used to extend the leg. So they just kind of go, ugh, and they're in a leg extend. So they froze a wolf spider, and they were able to make the leg contract or extend and then contract using a syringe. Oh, baby. And they found it was so much better and stronger than like what they had been doing with these robot actuator arms. So I think pretty soon we're all going to have new appendages. Yay. I mean, like spider-based. Wouldn't that be cool? But, I mean, it is a serious piece, and if you're interested in such things, I think you'll enjoy reading it. It may well make great big advances in robotics, or it may make spider Terminator men. Yeah. Well, sleep good tonight. That's a wrap-up for the week of 24 July 2022. I'll see you next week on the Security Weekly News.